So let's start, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on these, as you'll see why, at some examples that have been put forward, which are referred to as constant load tests. And one of the older versions of this is from Catch, published in the 1970s, originally published in 76, and then updated in 79. It's a 120-second maximal test. Now, I'm just going to put the points up. It's a fixed resistance of 5.6 kilograms on a cycloergometer. Although it's a 120-second test, you don't tell the participant how long the test is for. And then what we do is we express the outcome of the test as the total work done, the total joules or kilojoules or total wattage that was performed. But let's think about this very carefully. There's a number of things going on here. The first thing is that all we're doing is measuring time. So it's 120 seconds, and it's how much work they can do in 120 seconds against a resistance. So we're not actually taking any physiological measurement. The second thing is, because you're not taking a physiological measurement, and it's a 120 seconds test, which is maximal, hopefully there's a little alarm bell going off. And let me show you why I think there should be an alarm bell going off. If you look at the data set here, 120 seconds, this is maximum intensity exercise, 63% of the energy is coming from aerobic metabolism. So in that test, although it's 120 seconds, we don't know where the energy's come from because you've not recorded any physiological response. It's just literally how much work has been done. So actually, it is very possible that you could have somebody who is aerobically capable, you know, quite a fit aerobic athlete. Let's say, you know, maybe like let's say a CrossFitter, for example. They could do really well on this test, perhaps even better than somebody who's an 800-meter runner, who's more anaerobically orientated, because they've got good aerobic contribution. They're able to just sustain the work, but they would come out, according to the data set, of having a large anaerobic capacity. So we're left with this position, which is that the test, although the authors will tell you that the test retest is good, so they say it's, you know, correlation is 0.92. Remember, it's a correlation, and the problem is with correlations, they are merely just showing an association. Look, I did well on this test, and I did well on this test. It's correlated. It doesn't tell us it's reliable, but it doesn't do anything. And also, why is it a fixed resistance of 5.6 kilos? If you only weigh 50 kilos, then 10% of your mass is going as the resistance. It's not linked to the lean body mass of the participant. And again, we've got the issue that Green pointed out in his European Journal of Applied Physiology paper, which is you can't have a time limit when assessing the capacity, because it's like taking the sponge and wringing the sponge out. You don't know how long it's going to take to wring all the water out of the sponge. So I'm just going to show you kind of what this looks like. So this is the back end of one of these tests. So here we've got a participant. You can already see the pain on the face. So the job is that the participant is going as hard as they can for 2 minutes against, this is their fixed resistance, which is 5.6 of the body mass, just to show you what it looks like. So you can kind of see it's not a pleasant test. And actually you really have to question about the veracity of a test that doesn't give us any physiological variables and actually doesn't allow us to distinguish high energy phosphates from glycolysis and fundamentally from aerobic metabolism. So let's move on from that test. It doesn't seem to be fit for purpose. So the second one I want to show you is going back even further. This is the Cunningham-Faulkner treadmill test. And it's actually a reasonably well-cited test. It seems to have had a little bit of weight, particularly in the 70s. It got a lot of traction, and oddly does still seem to crop up within the literature. And the premise, again, it's constant load. So what I mean by constant load is the resistance that the individual works at does not change throughout the test. So on the previous test, the resistance was always 5.6 kilograms. In this, the resistance doesn't change because the speed is 13 kilometers an hour. The treadmill gradient is 20%. And all the participant has to do is run to exhaustion. That's all they've got to do. And the parameter that is measured or recorded in this is time. So it's just literally how long can somebody go for at 13 kilometers an hour at a constant gradient of 20%. Now, Claude Bouchard in 91 suggested that actually the test was quite reliable, and they used it in a large-scale study in the US, which is to do with hereditary parameters, and they wanted to assess, you know, the kind of the genetic components in fitness and anaerobic capacity with one of the measures, and they used this test, and they suggested that it was a reliable test. But the key thing here is it's a measure of fatigue resistance, because you, again, same issues that you have with the constant load test. You're not separating out the aerobic and anaerobic energy release. You are clearly not separating out the high energy phosphates from substrate level glycolysis. At least it's not time limited. But why is it 13 kilometers an hour? Why is it a 20% gradient? There is no rationale for those as parameters, and previous authors have said, oh, it correlates really well to kind of gold standard measures, but it's a correlation. It's, you know, it's not a causal relationship. Again, test retest correlations are being used in all of the literature for this. I think, you know, if that was done really well, doing something like limits of agreement, you would see an enormous difference on a test retest with this. So clearly, it's not measuring anything physiological. It's got all the same trappings, bar the time to exhaustion that the constant load cycle of catch has got. So again, not really fit for purpose. But I wanted just to show you why these kind of tests don't work. I thought it'd be worth showing you what this looks like. So 2 examples. So this is somebody just starting the test. So you can see the treadmill gradient. Speed doesn't feel very high, 13 kilometers an hour, but you can see that with the gradient, it puts a lot of strain. But think about this. Think how aerobic that is. There's a lot of aerobic energy contributing to this test. Okay, so let's look at Kingsley on this example here. So Kingsley's a really good endurance runner.
Keep it up, come on.
So again, everything we've been dealing with is at play here. There is no real physiological rationale for why this protocol is designed as it is, and the fact there are no physiological variables is of real concern. Why you cannot actually estimate somebody's anaerobic capacity if you've not made any either measure of the anaerobic contribution or actually try to at least isolate the anaerobic energy from the aerobic energy. So, in the paper from Cunningham, back in '69, they write this. The longer run time for the short exhaustive run after training is dependent on the availability of an increased energy supply to the contracting skeletal muscle cells. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? That is absolutely true. But they write this: we hypothesize that these parameters indicate an increase in the amount of adenosine triphosphate produced by oxidative phosphorylation by glycolysis and from creatine phosphate during the short exhaustive run. They even suggest that there is a contribution from oxidative phosphorylation, but can't account for it. They can't separate it out. So they acknowledge that it must be playing a part, but we're trying to tap, and they're trying to tap into the anaerobic capacity. You have to be able to separate the aerobic from the anaerobic in order to identify that capacity.